as we were working on Melissa Lucio's case last year, she had an execution pending. And we know Melissa. Oh my God, they're fixing to kill one of our friends. What can we do? Because I'm going to fight for any woman anybody to not be executed. And as we were working on it, it was like, I don't know, Brandon, there were certain groups of people that were just like, sorry, they didn't have the same passion that we did. And the reason why is because they either weren't system impacted or they didn't understand the community of the women on the inside. It really showed us this gap. We really need a space of our own because our needs are so unique. And we just started to do it. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just like, well, let's just start meeting.
Yeah, just tell us a little bit about what life was like leading up to your incarceration experience.
Yeah, so I was incarcerated the first time when I was 15. I had a, escalating mental health crisis, which accumulated into a very violent, serious offense. And I was convicted under determinate sentencing laws, which mean you get a suspended sentence. The cap is 40 years. I got 20, which was pretty merciful in Russ County. That's deep East Texas. And there were a lot of elements to my offense that were pretty stigmatized. I had a girlfriend, sexual abuse history, mental illness. I was pretty fortunate. And that's sad to say, 20 years is a blessing, but it was, because it could have been so much worse. And so I spent 2 years in the Texas Youth Commission, which is now the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. Brandon, the most atrocious, horrible years of my life. In the news, you see the scandals with our youth system, and that's why I work really hard on the Finish the Five campaign to close the youth prisons in Texas, to do something different. But bad years. When I turned 18, I was transferred to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, where I spent 8 years. I was relieved. I was relieved to get transferred to TDCJ just because of how bad TYC was. There was a little bit more structure and oversight, but not a lot, right? I remember thinking, how am I going to get through this? And I was sitting outside. I was on the yard, and I found a little place behind Four Dorm on Riverside to just stare off into the distance. Deep depression. Not only have I done this thing that I am deeply remorseful about, right, that changed the life of my family and my community, but what does this look like for building a future? And my spiritual practice really came into play then, and I decided, well, my dad always said, honey, you got to live where you're at, and wherever you go, there you are. So you got to figure out a way to make this the best you can, despite the horrendous heat and the bad conditions and the abuse. You've got to figure out a way. So I just developed community. Women on the inside, we create kind of a family structure with one another. And I really had a lot of mentorship and protection from the older women. And, just kind of we lived in our bubble, right? We lived in this world on the unit where, I played basketball, we organized sports, and then I got into college. I did get my high school diploma while I was at TYC, one of few girls that did. And so I enrolled in college, and, it was like I was away at college. It really was at that time. College on the women's units was robust. It was every night. We had the youthful offender grant where I was able to go to school every night, 5 nights a week, and I did it. And it gave me a lot of purpose and meaning. And I also was a peer health educator, so I was trained through AIDS Foundation Houston to teach health classes. And so then I get out. I make my first parole. Unheard of. Everybody's shocked. Jennifer got an FI1 on that 20. And I went home, went back to East Texas, went to the University of Texas at Tyler, loved it. I love that school. I'll always have a deep loyalty and fondness for UT Tyler because I really enjoyed being an actual student for a change. Even though, Brandon, I always felt like I don't deserve to be here and like I'm carrying this dirty secret. Like if people really knew, I'm on parole, like I'm an imposter, like I'm somehow, tricking people into thinking I'm a normal person. But I was getting my degree in journalism with a minor in, I think it was speech. Enjoyed it, worked for the, college paper, taking some pictures, doing the circulation stuff. And then I transferred to the University of Houston. In Houston, I went to work at AIDS Foundation Houston doing, going back inside, going to Plain State, teaching and training the women how to be public health educators. And life was...
You were still on parole while you were doing that?
Yes, yeah, I was still on parole. Had a lot of success, man. I'm doing great. Yay. And education was key to that because that was what was keeping me, I felt like I was hanging by a thread because my mental health was not being treated. And so what I latched onto was my spiritual faith and education and work. And so that saw me through, right? But that didn't quite do it because when mental illness strikes and the symptoms were severe, I couldn't sustain myself just on that. And so I ended up with another charge in another crisis and ended up back in prison, another 10 years almost at Mountain View. But of course, I did the things that I knew immediately, plus some other stuff, starting to dig into my mental health. We had a teetering bachelor's program and still not really a solid one there at the women's facility. And the college program had changed a lot. It had started to not be as robust. And then there's some department changes that really affected that. But I took what I could and whatever education opportunities were there. I worked as the librarian for those almost 10 years in the Mountain View unit. And that was just kind of a hub, a community there. So got out, was on super intensive supervision, which was a nightmare. But still just really focusing on those things that have brought me success, which was treatment, education, spiritual support, and peer support. The community that I was establishing out here, that really was the same community that supported me on the inside. And found my way to some great jobs in Austin, working on advocacy stuff for the women and people with disabilities on the inside, and then created Lioness, Justice Impacted Women's Alliance, where we focus solely on community with the women on the inside and bringing them together on the outside to work on the advocacy stuff. So that's my journey in a nutshell.
What years was this? You were in TYC and then got started in prison?
Yeah, so TYC was from January 1995 until January of 97. And then my TDCJ time was 97 to 04, and then back in 09, and then I got out December 2018, Taylor Swift's birthday. So yes. Long journey.
Yes, you are a big fan of Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
So we are, I guess, basically the same age then. I was doing juvenile in all of 96, most of 97. I didn't go to TYC. I went to one of these placement facilities where it's a lockdown facility, but you have like CPS, kids that are in the foster care, but they've committed crimes. I'm not really sure like how to explain that, but it was a placement facility for about 13 months. And then I got out for a little while and went to state jail. In juvenile, I guess when I came into prison in 99 and 2000, I guess I had missed the 80s and 90s crazy, violent Hollywood era. But juvenile was much crazier than adult prison. It was just wild.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
It just seems to me like the juvenile fit the stereotypical Hollywood. Maybe it's because we were kids and we thought we had to do all that. But when I got to the adults, it was not really that as big of a deal as it was in juvenile. So it doesn't surprise me that juvenile was a really bad experience for you. But then going into the adult system, your experience was, even though you were depressed as far as like other people, it was more uplifting and safe.
I mean, we made it. We made it
Yeah.
as safe as we could. I think the key to survival, when you're incarcerated, is finding the right people to be in community with, and then finding the scraps of positive programming or mental health treatment that you can have, and latching on to that with everything you can, and outside support. That, my family, even I continued to mess up, they were still there for me. I think it's being successful despite, what often felt like a cesspool of violence, and apathy. And I think when I was incarcerated that first 10 years as a kid growing up in that system, there was some of that, Brandon, that I just didn't understand. Well, when I got locked up the second time, I was like, oh my God. Like, I don't know, as a kid, to survive, I just pretended that was my whole life and I had never been anywhere else. And so it was just, I really dissociated from my family and the world. And then when I got out and was an adult and, had a life and had success, and the thought of losing that again was just, it was terrifying. It was terrifying. So I was determined to find whatever was going to work to keep me from going back in there.
What made you want to get involved in college? Was it just something that was being promoted on the unit, or you had always had an interest in pursuing your education, or what was that like?
Yeah, so I got classified.
Conditioning or what?
Well, I got classified to Lane Murray, and this was when Lane Murray had just been built back in 97, 98. So it was a new facility. It was huge, right? It's, I believe, the biggest women's facility. And Marcy always teases me that, oh, girl, you were at Mountain View in your AC. I said, girl, that was the second time. Now, let's talk about the first time when I was at Lane Murray in Riverside, that were not air conditioned anywhere on the unit. Summit Crane is, but not Riverside. But so when I got to Lane Murray, and it was just, oh, Brandon, I was on the host squad. It was just, here I am, 18 years old with, at least 8 more years, maybe even 18. Who knows? There's no promise of parole. And, I signed up for college because college wasn't at that unit. And, I'm 18. I had dreams of going to college when I was at home. I was going to go to Baylor and play basketball. And, that didn't happen. But I did always have a hope and a dream of having some type of college education. And I think of all the things that you can participate in prison, and I tell the girls that we still talk to, the ladies, get your college education, get your GED, your high school diploma, and college education. All that other stuff is great. It's supportive, but there's the power in terms of employment. And but at the time, I just wanted to be a student. I wanted to feel normal.
Yeah. For me, when I was the third time that I went, I was 19, and they had a college program, and I had toyed with the idea of going to college before prison, but I wasn't actually committed to it. And so when I went, I thought to myself, I'm going to be behind because I got an 8-year sentence. And so you could potentially make parole after 4. And I just thought, I'm going to be behind. Other people my age will have bachelor's degrees and starting their careers. I got to do whatever I can. So I was just, took as many college classes as I could. And I was under the youth offender grant also. So I could just take as much as I possibly could, and still do host squad and all that drama. Well, one of the things that I would say now, I wouldn't have said it back then, is that education done rightly, it has the effect second only to things like religious conversion, especially for some people. If education wasn't a part of their youth or growing up, and then they go to college and they learn about history and science, it just like awakens this passion in them that's something they've never experienced, and then the next thing they want to do is share it with others. So that's the kind of experience that I've had, or I have heard from others as well, is, getting involved in college was a great thing. And then the next thing you want to do is share it with your family and your kids and all the stuff you're learning. At what point, or was it a conscious thought for you that, hey, when I get out, I want to give back. I want to be involved in advocacy, or, like you were to work for the AIDS Foundation. Was that always a thought, or did it just come about like that?
When I got out the first time, it was like, I'm going to go finish my degree. I had my associate's degree, so I'm going to go work on my bachelor's. And I really did love the Pure Health education program. Like, you're teaching people, and I really enjoyed that. And you're right, like seeing people light up when they learn something and they can apply it. So, it kind of just naturally developed towards that. But, certainly this last time that I've gotten out, that was through my whole my whole 8-10 years was, I'm going to do everything I can to utilize the stuff that I've experienced here, the connections and the women and the passion that I'm developing for righting these wrongs in our system, and that begins with education, whether it's higher education or whether it's, just teaching others about the system or the legislative process. When people are empowered with knowledge and you show them how to put it into action, it's powerful. So that was my 8 years of planning. Again, the college program had almost deteriorated for us. So I'm struggling to take one bachelor's class every semester, every other semester, but encouraging the other women to do this and participate in everything that they can. So, no, it was a goal from the beginning. Me and, Alexa, we just sat at that back table, at that metal table, for years, plotting and figuring out how do we utilize the stuff that we have and the respect that I earned as somebody that wrote for the prison newspaper. Even though it wasn't a fancy journalistic endeavor, it still was community, right? Yep. And how do I utilize people knowing my name through this and this trust and this education to create community on the outside for change?
So, yeah, that's something that I've learned. I met Alexa and Rabia at a conference. And then I don't know, I had heard of you. Oh, yeah, that was before the TIFA conference. And I heard about you.
Oh, not the big TIFA.
And then only recently, I met Marcy just randomly out here in Houston. And then I realized all of you know each other, like you were all locked up together. So when it comes to Lioness, where was that forged? Was that something that was, forged on the inside as well? How did that come about?
Well, on the inside, we just envisioned, I'm going to Austin and I'm going to testify in front of those legislators. I'm going to hold TDCJ accountable when I can. I'm going to do the thing, right? I don't know what that looks like. And, I came into these jobs. I also worked with the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities, Texas After Violence Project. And, that was it, right? But there was something, as we were working on Melissa Lucio's case last year. She had an execution pending. And we know Melissa. Oh my God, they're fixing to kill one of our friends. It state sanctioned. And what can we do? Because I'm going to fight for any woman anybody to not be executed, but certainly Melissa, because there's a lot of points of innocence in her case. And as we were working on it, it was like, I don't know, Brandon, there were certain groups of people that were just like, sorry, like, they didn't have the same passion that we did. And the reason why is because they either weren't system impacted or they didn't understand the community of the women on the inside and what that bond is for us. So we were like, you know what, if we can't get help, then we'll just, and we did, we worked a lot with death penalty action, but it really showed us this gap in like, we really need a space of our own because our needs are so unique. I often say that the needs of men and women in our Texas prisons, they overlap a lot, but there are very specific needs that are overlooked for women of color, women with disabilities that is even worse for you guys, So it was like finding this place, and we just started to do it. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just like, well, let's just like start meeting. Let's make a logo. Let's make a website. Let's start doing a newsletter. And then it just kind of, as the rest of us were learning and growing in our other spaces of advocacy, we were able to apply that to Lioness. And I feel like we've continued to grow and actually are formally an organization now. And it really was just that gap. We just didn't feel like we were being heard as women, because our voices get blurred out sometimes. There are men in our space that talk over us, or it's just a need that has to be highlighted separately, we feel like.
Are there any other people that you have met, like older women or people who have been involved in this, maybe behind the scenes, or they've been unheard of, that you've run into?
So you mean like that have been working like on women's incarceration that I didn't know about?
Or like formerly incarcerated women who have been involved in advocacy or different projects.
Yeah, well, I mean, as we started to put this together, we're just kind of gathering all of us in our separate spaces, but what we find out is that, one of the things, Brandon, they used to tell us about when we would complain about, hey, we don't have a bachelor's program that's sustainable, that works, like you're not investing in it. And Alexa tells us a lot is that, essentially being told, well, women just don't express a real desire for this. They don't sign up. They don't, they're not encouraged. You don't understand what the psyche of an incarcerated woman is and where she's coming from, to be able to tap into that place inside of her where she feels safe to do so. So it was always kind of like this idea that, well, women don't stick together. They don't come together. They don't really care about these things. Absolutely they do. But it's finding a way to tap into that to where women feel empowered and safe to do that. And what we discover is that almost every incarcerated woman we know, whether it's, hey, I just want to participate by donating or printing off some newsletters. I don't want to be out front. I don't want to talk about my incarceration. All of them want to support. You know what I mean? And so we're starting to see women come out of the woodwork that have been hiding in the background because they just haven't been empowered to be involved.
Well, I know when we started on Plain State Jail, we have more classes, more opportunities there than on any of the men's unit. I don't know if it's because of the desire, but that's the farthest unit we go to. So like when Alexa came with me the other day, it's a 70-mile trip from Huntsville. It's an hour and a half, 3 hours round trip. But they have like 4 or 5 classes, 4 nights a week. And in my class, I'm doing business ethics this semester. All of them participate. Unlike the guys, like it's kind of hard, you got to cajole them to speak up. But I get the impression that they really enjoy it. And, even they're coming by, like they're not even in the class, like, hey, when are y'all going to offer this class or that class or whatever? So maybe it's the case that we have sort of lit the fire and there's a lot of interest there now. The only thing is, unfortunately, there's not any other women's units near us, within relatively reasonable driving distance. There's Henley. And so, we might be able to do something on Henley, but yeah, it's been really difficult. Well, what was it like for you the first time you actually got a chance to go speak, at the legislature before, politicians and public officials? Were you nervous, or were you just like chomping at the bit, like you've been ready to do this for so long?
I was pretty nervous. It was last session. So this was about 4 years ago. And it was on the second look bill, which would have changed the parole eligibility for folks who were incarcerated as children, but tried as adults, right? And it would have changed their parole eligibility to 1/4 instead of 1/2. It was interesting, Brandon, sitting there, it was, session had just started, and it was one of the first bills in that committee. And I was texting my boss, and I was like, she's like, do you have your notes? Do you have notes? Like, I'm ready. I'm okay. And I was with Maggie, and she was a little bit more cool-headed because she'd done this before. But, And I listened to people coming up there from organizations and, professionals, and they're, making the case for these kids that are now adults, right? And it's like, okay, this is great. It's wonderful data and all this other stuff. And they're talking about me. They're talking about my friends. Like, I was the only one with lived experience that got up at the end and said, and I'd written out what I was going to say and I'd practiced it. And I, still was so nervous, because there's a level of vulnerability there too. And to just be able to say, I'm standing here as one of those kids that was fortunate enough not to be tried as an adult, but given an adult sentence that I eventually had to do. And knowing that there are women in there that are middle aged now that I knew in juvenile, because we haven't made this right. We don't even punish children like that anymore because of brain science and what we know now. And it was probably my best testimony and something I'll never forget, because it's like I dreamed of this day to be able to speak on behalf of people that can't speak for themselves. And they may write their legislators letters, and the legislators do read them. They do. But there's still this otherness, right? And I think maybe, I don't know, maybe you experienced this too when we were, have been before people. It's like, oh, wow. Oh, so like you're a real normal person just because you made a mistake. And it really helps humanize what we're talking about. So it was nerve-wracking, but super empowering. And I was like, oh yeah, we're in it for the long haul now.
I always get nervous. And a lot of it's that imposter syndrome. Like, I feel like they're being condescending. They don't trust me. I've been out a long time, but I still feel like that. Like, I lose my breath trying to fumble over my words and get cotton mouth, because I feel like, they're still sort of condescending and not terribly interested in what we have to say, or maybe they expect something different, at least in that setting. When you get a chance to be real informal with people, like in a teaching setting, that's always better, at least for me, because I do well there. But even when I was with you and Alexa a couple of months ago, I was still like getting cotton mouthed and nervous about what I had to say. I don't know what's going to get me over that hump. And it was with Tifa back in 2017 that I first got up there, and I fumbled all over the place with that one. But yeah, I still get nervous.
Well, that I fumbled that conference too. But I don't think the nerves ever really go away. And certainly I think there are some of them that are condescending and not interested. And, boy, there was some nightmares that happened in the other committee regarding zoning stuff for certain offenses. And one of the legislators was downright nasty. And those gentlemen told the lady that she's another advocate. They said, I'm not coming back up here. I will never go through that again. And so there is this fear that I'm going to share something and somebody's going to roast me or rip me apart. It might happen, but you're not going to die, right? Like it will be okay. And certainly, yeah, you'll be fine. But hearing the legislators, when me and Marcy testified on the women's programming bill, and this was about making sure that educational opportunities, including college, are equitable, right? Not just accessible, but equal, right? Don't give us a degree that's not accredited, although some of the ladies enjoy it. But, I didn't go as hard as I normally do, because Wyndham has made some huge strides. Absolutely. TDCJ could do better, but I don't feel like we went that hard. And the legislators latched onto that and asked some really tough questions to the state. And it was a moment of, my God, they've got it. They got it. They understand the problem of women's higher education. They get it. And they're not accepting simple answers and answers that are kicking the can down the road. They want to hear. And that, Brandon, is it's so gratifying, right? Because it's not to put the state on the spot to be a jerk. it is to get people to really understand the issues that we're talking about and figuring out ways to fix it. And passing legislation isn't always the win, right? There are many, many times that we go and testify or work on stuff and that we see the prison system begin to implement and change on their own. And then they say, oh, well, what are you talking about? Which, fine, whatever they want to do. But it all works together, and it is having the courage to be able to get up there and say, which I want to say, by the way, you did a phenomenal job and you looked super dapper and handsome in that suit. So you looked like you should have been sitting behind the dais. So I want to tell you, you did great.
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about Lioness, what you all are involved in, how those who are watching could either be involved or write you all and find out more?
Yeah. So, I gave you the history to Lioness Justice Impacted Women's Alliance. It was created for us girls and women to have a space where it's just us working on advocacy, leadership training, and really kind of developing out those leadership skills to be able to do stuff in your community. We're really working on that part of it right now, to have area groups where regional groups are meeting together and working on the stuff, because we can't be all over the state of Texas. And that's what we envision. And, the people ask me all the time, well, why did y'all pick a lion? Why did you pick a lioness? And, no better symbol than sisterhood. People don't know that lioness stay together their whole life, even when the guys of the group wander off to another pride. The girls in the pride stick together and hunt together. And so it was just really impactful for us to say that's a great symbol for what we're trying to build. Lioness is a nonprofit program sponsored by Build Up Inc., which is a 501(c)(3) charity. They're a capacity builder. So what they're doing is training us and teaching us how to put structure to our organization so that one day we can leave the nest and become our own self-supporting, sustaining nonprofit. And our mission at Lioness is, we're an organization that's led by currently and formerly incarcerated girls and women in Texas, with the purpose of ending incarceration and the systematic devaluing of girls and women within our criminal legal system. Okay, and criminal legal system is the whole process, all of it. So from day one in our communities to the moment you get out to supervision, the entire criminal legal system really, treats girls and women in a way that, is uniquely degrading. Recently, we worked on some legislation that would, hold TDCJ, the Texas prison system, accountable for the way that they transport women to their medical appointments. Because you got to go all the way to Gatesville, all the way to Plain State to stay overnight, then all the way down to Galveston. Yeah. And the things that women were enduring on that trip were just especially bad. So we got signed by the governor last week or the week before. And this was directly the outcome of community working together, teaching women about the legislative process, hearing from the women on the inside, because, that's a part of our organization, is not just formerly, but currently incarcerated women. We answer every piece of mail. We track it. We put it on a spreadsheet. We are keeping track of all the issues and units and ladies that are reporting things that are important to them. And that's what shapes our priorities in our direction out here. And, our vision is to achieve our mission through radical advocacy, education, community engagement, grassroots organizing, and some legislative action. And I tell folks we're not solely about legislative advocacy. We are here to be in community and to figure out what our community needs and to respond to that, whether it's leadership training, whether it's reentry curriculums, whether it's just showing up and supporting something. We want to do, wherever we're being talked about, we are going to be in that space. We know that everybody's differences everybody's different. People have different views and political views and religious, but we want to bring a unified voice despite all those differences. Those differences make us great, right? And being able to unify that as one powerful voice of system impacted women in the state. And, because at the core of it, we believe that jails and prisons are inherently harmful to human beings and certainly to mothers and daughters and sisters. So, somebody said the other day, God, your mission is to end the incarceration. So you don't believe in prisons? No, don't. We know that we are in Texas and we are tackling that from all kinds of angles, right? Through better programming and education in the system that we've got, which, will keep people from returning, will have them, create stability in their own lives. And so then you begin to dismantle that system from every single angle until it's no longer there. And that's really the way that we look at that. So yeah, our mission is to end the incarceration of girls and women. And while they're there, to make sure that you don't disrespect them or degrade them and always serve them with respect and value.
Well, I'll have the address at the bottom of the screen. I think I put the address when I talked to Marcy as well, but I'll put it here so that they know where to write.
Well, and I can tell them right now, P.O. Box 12051, Austin, Texas, 78711.
And so what does the future look like for you long term? Growing and developing Lioness and what else? Anything in particular?
Yeah, I hope to continue to build out, the current jobs that I have, working to better the system for people with disabilities and youth in our system. And I really love the Texas After Violence Project. That is a community-based archive. And what that is we collect stories, items that document state-sanctioned violence, such as the death penalty, incarceration. And that's important, right? Because, if we're not careful, our narrative is often stolen and, our histories are erased. We see that in all kinds of ways in different populations. So we collect those stories and we kind of, if you think of archiving like a museum, right? Like to hold it and preserve it, to make sure the truth of it is never erased. So I anticipate doing so much more there. And with Lioness, just continuing to learn and grow. I didn't get a degree in business, although that was the one that we were working towards, that we were never able to. Yeah, well, Alexa did. Alexa got her finally, got her bachelor's degree there. It took many, many years, just because of what's offered to the women. But, just trying to learn and grow together to put real structure to this, to make this a, stable organization for, a safe haven for when women come out, they know, well, let me find that Lioness group that I wrote to, because, if they need help or answers or just support, just basic support, they know that they can trust us to do what we can.
Do you plan on pursuing any more education?
I would love to, Brandon. I have some stuff with the student loans that have been oppressive, but certainly, I've thought about it. I know several other ladies in our group have continued on with their education. I think for now, right now, I'm concentrating on my current positions, but it's never off the agenda. I mean, UT's offering an English course and Taylor Swift lyrics. So, I mean, that may pull me back just on its own. Yeah. It's a real class. It's a real credit. It is.
Well, I'm sure. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I know that the women are going to really appreciate hearing from you. The ones in there who know you, seeing you here, talking to them on the inside, and also giving them an outlet for them to be able to write. So thank you so much for this. I hope that our proposals get accepted so that we go to Atlanta and are able to speak.
I know. I'm speaking it into existence now, Brandon.
Yeah. And also our Texas conference. That's a done deal. So looking forward to both of those. But thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.